I shouldn't have to live a lie. He clenched the keys in his hand for a moment before slipping them into the knob. Mark opened the door and slid his work bag off his narrow shoulders and onto the floor. He sighed deeply, already feeling defeated. This is the last thing he wanted to do today. As he approached the kitchen, he could hear Dave's favorite music playing softly in the background. As usual, Dave sat at the table, waiting for Mark to get home for dinner. The stew that was in the crock pot usually smelled so good, but today everything smelled sour to Mark. Babe, we have to talk. Mark was visibly upset, but continued. Look, I know I promised last time, but I'm just not ready. Mom and Dad are in town for a few days and they want to have dinner together. Mark sank into the chair opposite Dave. I promise, really, really promise this time, I'm going to tell them about you. Parents are supposed to love their kids no matter what, right? Mark finally looked up to meet Dave's disapproving gaze. I'm sorry. They'll only be here for a few hours. I'll take you downstairs and you can tinker on the car. That always puts you in a better mood. Mark's head hung low as he stood to retrieve his lover's wheelchair from the entryway. Dave's gaze didn't waver as Mark's words washed over him. The same eyes that made Mark fall for him were now dull and filled with disappointment. The two had met just under a year ago when Mark's antique car had broken down and only a few garages would work on the model that old. Dave had been intrigued by the slight, well-dressed young man in a show-quality antique car, the car, of course, being his main focus. They struck up a conversation about the car which Dave had raved about and any previous work that had been done on it. Mark had immediately fallen for Dave in that simple exchange. Dave was everything Mark wasn't. Tall, strong, confident, and blessed with the most beautiful green eyes that Mark had ever seen. Over the next 6 months, the immaculate car continued to have minor issues that Mark may or may not have had a hand in causing. Anything to have a reason to go to the shop and see Dave. Dave had finally approached Mark one evening when he had stopped into the shop for a broken windshield wiper blade. Mark had been so excited when Dave had asked if he minded taking the car for a spin. The moment they got into the car together, they would never leave each other's side ever again. Except, of course, when Mark's parents came to visit. Mark brought the chair into the dining room and sighed heavily as he looked to Dave. You know, it's hard to get you in here when you don't help. Dave sat in defiance at the table. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Mark swung around and quickly jerked Dave out of the seat and into his wheelchair. A piece of skin sloughed off his riding arm onto the floor as it slid against the table during the transfer. 2 hours tops, I promise. Mark planted a kiss on Dave's cold, blotchy cheek. The pressure forced a small grouping of maggots to fall from Dave's slightly parted lips. The green eyes that Mark loved so much were clouding more daily and slowly sinking into their sockets. As Mark pushed the chair towards the garage, he heard a knock on the front door. They're early, Mark groaned to himself, then made the decision. You know what? Tonight will be the night that they meet you. Are you ready, babe? Mark straightened his tie and jacket, looked to Dave, and quickly swept the maggots on his lap onto the floor. There, all tidy. Ready now? I'm so nervous I can barely breathe. Mark was giddy with his newfound courage. Well, let's not keep them waiting. Mark swung the door wide open and greeted his parents with open arms.